My name is Natalie Warren. I'm 34. I own Sapphire Luxury Hotels and Elite Catering. On paper, my life looks polished, success carved from grit, discipline, and late nights. But if you peel back the curtain, you'll see the foundation was built with my brother, James. James and I survived the chaos of our parents' divorce together. Two kids caught between slammed doors and whispered arguments that weren't so whispered. He was only 2 years older, but he carried himself like a guardian. He walked me to school every morning, holding my hand as if the world couldn't break me as long as he was there. He made sure the bullies kept their distance. That bond, tight, unshakable, was the only constant in a childhood that felt like shifting sand. I was 12 when everything collapsed. James was 14. The divorce ripped our house in two. Dad, Robert, buried himself in numbers at his accounting firm, showing up at dinner only in the form of excuses. Mom, Linda, starved for attention, found comfort elsewhere. Neither one saw the wreckage they left behind in us. When the papers were signed, they went to war, cold, bitter, silent, except when using us as messengers. Tell your father he's late on support. Ask your mother if I can pick you up earlier. We became their middlemen, their soldiers, their casualties. So James and I leaned on each other. Money grew tight. Mom, once a stay-at-home mother, scrambled to find work with outdated skills. Dad moved into a cramped apartment and turned his focus to a new girlfriend instead of bills. By 16, I was bussing tables at a diner. James stocked shelves at the grocery store. At night, we would dump coins on our bedroom floor, counting every dime to make sure we could cover groceries. "It's just you and me, Nat," he'd whisper, his voice steady. "No matter what happens, I've got you." That promise carried us through. He kept it. When I chased my dream of hospitality management, James stood in my corner. He didn't go to college. He went straight into construction, rising from apprentice to foreman before most of his friends had even finished school. And every month, like clockwork, he sent me a slice of his paycheck. Enough for textbooks. Enough to keep me afloat. Enough to remind me I wasn't alone. I started small, front desk at a boutique hotel. Long nights, rude guests, aching feet. But I worked harder than anyone else. Management noticed. Promotions followed. By 27, I was director of operations at one of Boston's most prestigious hotels. Then came my leap of faith, the moment that would define me. I poured my savings and a loan into a fading landmark, the Sapphire Grand. A beauty in ruins, dripping in history, but mismanaged into the ground. For 2 years, I bled myself dry. 18-hour days. Endless renovations. Fighting to restore her elegance. James never left my side. He called in favors from contractors, showed up on weekends with his crew, fixed things without sending me a bill. "Consider it an investment in our future," he'd grin. It paid off. By year 3, Sapphire was profitable. I expanded. Location 2, then 3. By 30, I had 5 hotels and launched Elite Catering, an extension of my vision, serving weddings and corporate events with precision and flair. Success became my language. But James was my anchor. He celebrated every win, held me steady through losses. Like the night a pipe burst, flooding my Boston property. I called him past midnight, panicked. 3 hours later, he was there, hard hat on, leading the repairs as if it were his own. Our parents noticed, though not in the way we craved. Dad suddenly resurfaced, parading us around expensive restaurants, name-dropping us to business associates. Mom turned competitive, comparing her modest career to what she called our lucky breaks. They never admitted that we had thrived not because of them, but in spite of them. And then Melissa Blake arrived. James met her at a charity golf event where my catering team served lunch. She was the kind of woman who drew attention without effort. Perfectly styled.
Polished.
Born into old money. Her father owned car dealerships across the Northeast. Her mother sat on the boards of cultural foundations. On the surface, Melissa was elegance. But underneath, something unsettled me. I saw it in how she spoke to the catering staff, curt, dismissive. The way her smile faded the moment her eyes met mine. Oh, you're the little sister who works in hotels. How quaint, she said, scanning the room for someone more interesting. My gut clenched. I wanted to pull James aside, warn him, but he was gone, entranced. Within weeks, Melissa had him orbiting her world, country clubs, elite restaurants where the staff treated him like he didn't belong. And I could feel it. My brother, my partner in survival, slipping into someone else's orbit. I started to notice the changes slowly, like shadows creeping across a familiar room. James began speaking a language that wasn't his. Words like the right people and our kind of establishment slipped into his conversations. My brother, the man who once counted quarters with me on the bedroom floor, was suddenly chasing a world that measured worth by designer labels and membership lists. He sold his beat-up pickup, the one with the dented fender we had driven on late-night fast food runs, and replaced it with a gleaming luxury SUV. The payments nearly broke him, but appearances mattered more now. Our sibling dinners, once sacred, dwindled. First weekly, then monthly. Eventually, Melissa's presence at the table became constant, like a shadow I hadn't invited. She would sigh audibly when James and I slipped into laughter over childhood stories she couldn't touch, her eyes flicking to the clock as if time with us were an obligation. It wasn't just Melissa. Her mother, Eleanor, sharpened the edge of every encounter. At James's birthday dinner, she leaned across the table with a polite smile that cut like glass. "So, Natalie, tell me about your little hotel business," she said, her tone soaked with condescension. I explained the scale, the properties, the catering division I'd built from nothing. She nodded once, unimpressed. "Well, I suppose anyone can succeed in America these days. But there's a difference between new money and established families." Melissa nodded beside her, adding, "It must be exhausting. Working in service. All those complaints. Dirty rooms. I could never." I tried to laugh it off, but the words landed heavy. James jumped in too quickly. "Natalie has always been a hard worker," he said, like my ambition was something to apologize for. "She'll probably sell the business once she settles down and starts a family." His comment pierced deeper than Melissa's arrogance. James knew me. He knew the fire in me wasn't going to be tamed by domestic expectations. In that moment, I realized how far he'd drifted. My brother, the boy who once promised I'd never face life alone, was fading into someone I barely recognized. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself it was a phase. That beneath Melissa's influence, my brother still existed, the one who had held my hand at every crosswalk. One evening, as the autumn air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves, my phone rang. James's voice was electric. She said yes. Nat Melissa agreed to marry me. I could hear the joy bursting through him, and despite every knot in my stomach, I found myself smiling. "That's wonderful news, James. Tell me everything." I curled up on my sofa as he painted the scene: the Hamptons, the Blake family summer estate, a private chef, a string quartet, thousands of rose petals scattered along the shoreline, and the ring, a 4-carat diamond, purchased with nearly 6 months of his savings. I closed my eyes, listening, forcing my voice steady. "It sounds perfect," I told him, though the extravagance felt like a stranger's version of my brother. "Have you set a date?" I asked. "Melissa wants June," he said. "Her mother says the best venues book up at least a year in advance. We need to start planning immediately." He paused, his tone dropping. "There's just one problem. The places Eleanor suggested are either booked solid or completely out of my budget." I could hear the tension in his voice. James earned well as a construction manager, but the Blakes lived on another planet. He was trying to stretch himself into a mold that didn't fit. "What about the Sapphire Grand?" I offered. "The ballroom can hold 300. The gardens are breathtaking in June." Silence lingered. "I don't know. Nat Melissa has her heart set on the Rosewood or the Peninsula." "The Sapphire Grand was just rated above both in Luxury Travel magazine," I countered. "And you get owner's discounts. Preferential booking. This could work." He hesitated, but eventually agreed to bring it up. 3 days later, he called back. Melissa will consider it, but she wants to see the place first. And she's worried about catering. Her mother knows celebrity chefs. I forced a calm reply. Tell her Elite Catering can create anything she dreams of. We have 2 Michelin-trained chefs. The day of the tour arrived, and the tension was thick enough to cut. Melissa and Eleanor glided through the Sapphire Grand's ballroom, their whispers and critical glances darting like knives. My manager, Anthony, presented our most luxurious wedding package while I walked them through the bridal suite, its windows framing the city skyline. The space is adequate, Eleanor finally said, her voice cool. But the color scheme doesn't match Melissa's vision. Would you be willing to reupholster the ballroom chairs and replace the draperies? I blinked. We can add chair covers, custom decor, anything to match your palette. But full reupholstery of 200 chairs would be unnecessary and costly. Melissa pursed her lips, turning to her mother. Perhaps we should continue looking at the rosewood. James's eyes found mine. That look, I knew it. The same one from when we were kids, when he needed me to bend, to give in, to keep the peace. I took a slow breath, forced a smile. Why don't you show me your Pinterest board? I'm sure we can transform this space into exactly what you envision. That concession opened the floodgates. Melissa launched into her dream, no, her fantasy. Imported flowers, a champagne fountain, custom lighting that mimicked starlight, a 10-tier cake. Anthony discreetly slid me the preliminary estimate. I caught the flash of panic on James's face as he read the number. Even with my discount, it soared past $100,000. And that was the exact moment, I made a decision that would alter everything. As my gift to you both, I said, steadying my voice, I'd like to cover the venue and catering deposit, $65,000 toward your wedding day. James's eyes widened, startled. Nat, that's too much. We can't accept that. But before he could say more, Melissa's lips curved into a quick smile. She exchanged a glance with Eleanor, then leaned forward. That would be lovely. We accept your generous offer. I forced a smile, though my chest tightened. Even for me, a woman running multiple businesses, $65,000 wasn't pocket change. It was months of profit, but I told myself it was worth it. Worth it for James. Worth it to prove I could build a bridge with the family he was marrying into. The planning started immediately, but I soon realized I was only a spectator in the play I was funding. Melissa hired Victoria Hayes, one of the most exclusive wedding planners in the city. I expected to be included. After all, it was my venue, my catering, my contribution. Instead, tastings were scheduled without me. Architectural changes were discussed over email threads I wasn't copied on. When I asked James why I was being kept at arm's length, he shifted uncomfortably. Melissa just wants everything perfect. She thinks if you're too involved, it might look like a conflict of interest since it's your business. I swallowed the sting, told myself to let it go. For James. Always for James. But the demands piled high. Melissa and Eleanor wanted my staff to take down a century-old chandelier because it didn't fit their color scheme. They pushed the kitchen into creating 15 sample menus. They booked my coordinator at odd hours, only to cancel without warning. Through it all, I stayed professional. I wanted my brother's wedding flawless, even if it meant enduring Melissa's endless tests. Still, I could see the strain on my staff. Anthony, my manager, caught me after one particularly brutal meeting with Eleanor. "You're a saint, Natalie," he muttered. "If she weren't your future family, I'd have thrown her out weeks ago." 6 months before the wedding, the deposit was finalized. I signed the paperwork myself, carefully noting what it covered. Venue rental, basic catering, rooms for the wedding party. Any extras, those royal-level upgrades Melissa dreamed of, would be billed separately. As the wedding drew closer, I waited for my formal invitation. At 3 months out, nothing had arrived. I brought it up to James, lightly. "Hey, when do the invitations go out?" "They went last week," he said vaguely. Melissa handled the list. "I'm sure yours is on the way." Another month passed. Still nothing. I convinced myself it was a mix-up. Maybe they assumed I didn't need a formal invite since the wedding was at my hotel. But unease gnawed at me. The first real crack came with a phone call from my cousin Dana. "Natalie, thank you for the invitation. It's gorgeous. That gold foil embossing must have cost a fortune. And Melissa's handwritten note, such a nice touch." My heart sank. I hadn't received an invitation. No note.
No gold foil.
Nothing. I started checking with other relatives. All of them had their invitations in hand. I called James that evening, forcing calm into my voice. "Is there something I should know? Everyone else seems to have their invitations." There was silence. Then James said carefully, "Melissa's been handling the guest list. I'll check with her." 3 days passed. No word. I texted him directly. "Need to finalize my attendance details. Am I allowed a +1? What color dress should I coordinate with the party?" His reply was vague. "Still working out details. We'll let you know soon." The patterns grew impossible to ignore. The bridal shower happened without me. I saw the pictures, Melissa glowing, James smiling, families together, on social media. My name was nowhere in the captions. Then came the engagement photos in the botanical gardens. Again, I hadn't even known. One afternoon, during a routine check-in with my staff, I learned Melissa had scheduled a meeting to review the reception seating chart. Curiosity got the better of me. "Can I see it?" I asked. The coordinator hesitated, then slid the paper forward. I scanned the list once, twice. My name wasn't there. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm the groom's sister." The coordinator's face went pale. Ms. Blake was very specific. She personally reviewed every name. The final blow came a month before the wedding. Our parents decided to host a family dinner, a rare event, given how long it had been since they'd sat at the same table. The restaurant was upscale, elegant, meant to honor James's milestone. I arrived to find James, Melissa, and both sets of parents waiting. From the moment I sat down, I felt it, the tension, thick as fog. Melissa leaned close to Eleanor, whispering, her eyes darting toward me with sharp glances. I forced myself to sit tall, my hands steady on the linen tablecloth, even as dread curled in my gut. Something was about to break. The dinner began politely enough, but when the talk shifted to wedding details, the tone changed. Questions I asked were brushed aside, replaced with vague answers and quick subject changes. Every attempt I made to join in was met with silence that felt deliberate. It was during the main course that Eleanor struck. She swirled her wine, her voice smooth but cutting. It's so important to have the right atmosphere at a wedding. The proper guests. The right connections. A wedding isn't just a celebration. It's a statement. A declaration of your place in society. Melissa leaned in, nodding. Some people don't understand the social implications of a high-profile event. Running hotels is one thing. Appreciating true elegance is another. Her gaze landed directly on me, her meaning sharp as glass. My father, oblivious as ever, chuckled nervously. Natalie understands elegance just fine. Her hotels are top-rated in the luxury market. Eleanor's smile was cold. Yes, but there's a difference between serving the elite and being one of them. The words sliced through me. In her eyes, I wasn't family. I was staff. I looked to James, desperate for defense. He didn't look up. His eyes stayed on his plate, as if the food could shield him from taking a stand. My mother, sensing my growing discomfort, rushed in. Natalie has been so generous with her contribution. The venue looks absolutely stunning. Melissa's reply came sharp, without hesitation. Yes, the financial arrangement has been helpful, though we've had to make substantial upgrades to bring the space up to standard.
Her words hit like a slap.
The Sapphire Grand, my flagship, my pride, the crown jewel of everything I had built, was being diminished to substandard by a woman who had never worked a single day in her life. The Sapphire Grand is a 5-star property, I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled under the table. We host diplomats, celebrities, society weddings regularly. Eleanor patted my hand like one might soothe a child. Of course you do, dear. And we appreciate your establishment's effort to accommodate our vision. After dinner, I tried to catch James alone, but Melissa intercepted him with perfect timing. "James, darling, we need to go over the rehearsal dinner with Daddy," she said, pulling him away. Her glance at me wasn't subtle. It was smug, triumphant. Days later, the illusion shattered further. A friend who worked at Melissa's country club called me. Her voice was hesitant, apologetic. She'd overheard Melissa laughing with her bridesmaids. "The hotel girl," Melissa called me. "The girl who thought she was invited. She actually believes she'll be sitting at the family table," Melissa had sneered. "As if we'd want her in the photos. We just need to keep her happy until the big day, since she controls the venue." One of the bridesmaids had asked, "But what about the money she gave?" 65,000 is a lot to take, without including her. Melissa's reply froze me to my core. "That money's already spent. What's she going to do? Ask for it back?" "James says she's loaded. She'll get over it." I couldn't breathe. I picked up the phone that night and called James. My voice shook with fury and pain. "Am I invited to your wedding or not? Because from what I'm hearing, Melissa has other ideas." He sighed, exhausted. "Nat, it's complicated. Melissa and her mother have very specific ideas about the guest list. They want to maintain a certain atmosphere." "An atmosphere without your only sister?" My voice cracked. "The sister who gave you $65,000 for this wedding?" "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," James shot back. "Melissa's family moves in important circles. This wedding could open doors for both of us." I felt my chest tighten. "Since when do you care about important circles? What happened to the brother who used to say we only needed each other?" His silence lasted a beat too long. Then, "People grow up, Natalie. They change. Maybe you should try it sometime, instead of clinging to the past." The words cut deeper than anything Melissa had ever said. My own brother, dismissing me like I was nothing more than an anchor holding him back. I whispered, "Is that Melissa talking or you?" His tone turned cold. "This conversation isn't productive. I need to go. Melissa and I have a florist appointment." The line went dead. I sat in the silence, staring at the phone in my hand. The brother I loved, the boy who had once been my protector, was gone, slipping further into someone I barely recognized. Still, hope clung stubbornly inside me. Maybe it was stress. Maybe once the wedding passed, the old James would return. I made one last attempt. I poured my heart into an email, reminding him of everything we had survived, how I'd always stood by him, how it hurt to be shut out of his most important day. I promised him that no matter what, I'd make sure his wedding was perfect, because that's what family does. His reply was brief, formal, cold. "Thank you for your understanding. I'll speak with Melissa about the guest list situation." Days passed. Silence stretched. The wedding was now only a week away, and I was beginning to accept the unthinkable. I might not attend my own brother's ceremony, even after giving everything to make it possible. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a budget meeting with my executive team when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, is this Natalie Warren?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped, filled the line.
"Yes."
"Speaking," I said, already stepping out of the conference room, my pulse racing. "This is Victoria Hayes." The voice on the line said, clipped and professional. "Wedding planner for the Warren Blake ceremony at the Sapphire Grand. I'm calling regarding your $65,000 deposit." My pulse skipped. I gripped the phone tighter. "Yes? Is there a problem with the payment? I processed it myself months ago." There was hesitation. "Not exactly," she said carefully. "I've been instructed by the family to inform you that your invitation has been canceled. However, they intend to retain the deposit you provided." The world stopped. The hallway tilted around me. I reached for the wall to steady myself. "Excuse me?" Her voice lowered, almost apologetic. "The family has revised the guest list. Your attendance is no longer required, but they would like to keep the venue and catering arrangements as planned." "Which family?" I asked, my voice breaking into a whisper. "Who made this decision?" "Miss Blake and her mother," she replied. I was told Mr. Warren is aware and has agreed. My brother.
James.
The boy who once split his sandwich with me every day because he knew I was too shy to ask for more. The boy who clutched my hand at Grandma's funeral and swore we'd always have each other. He had agreed to erase me from his wedding and keep my $65,000. May I ask why? I managed, my throat burning. There was a pause. Then the words came, each one like a dagger. I was told your presence might distract from the event's atmosphere. Miss Blake felt the family dynamics could create tension. She also mentioned your professional connection to the venue. That guests might confuse your role as owner with that of staff. The cruelty knocked the air from my lungs. My entire life, I had fought to build something from nothing. My business wasn't a weakness. It was my triumph. Yet here, it was twisted into a reason to shame me. Did James say this? I pressed, desperate to know. I haven't spoken with him directly, Victoria admitted. The instruction came from Miss Blake. But she assured me Mr. Warren agreed. My vision blurred. Betrayal ran hot in my veins. They weren't just excluding me, they were using me. My money, my venue, my staff, my work, all while shutting me out of the one moment that mattered most. And the $65,000? I asked coldly. They expect to keep it while excluding me? Yes, Victoria confirmed. Her voice faltered. The deposit is considered non-refundable. Miss Blake mentioned you presented it as a gift, not contingent on attendance. A fire ignited inside me. The shock dissolved into anger. No, into clarity. They thought they could humiliate me, exploit me,
Discard me.
Miss Warren, are you still there? Victoria's voice trembled. Yes, I said, calm now.
Too calm.
Let me confirm. The bride and her mother have decided I'm not welcome at my brother's wedding, despite my financial contribution, despite the fact that it's being held at my property. And my brother has agreed. That's my understanding, she said cautiously. I drew a long, steady breath. Victoria, thank you for calling me directly. But I don't think you realize. I own the Sapphire Grand, and Elite Catering, and the hotel chain housing their out-of-town guests. A sharp inhale echoed on the other end. I wasn't aware. Miss Blake introduced you only as Mr. Warren's sister, who had contributed to the fund. I see. My voice hardened. In that case, deliver this message to Miss Blake and to my brother. Cancel the wedding. Victoria gasped. Miss Warren, you can't. You're not the bride or groom. You don't have the authority. No. I cut her off. But I do own the venue, the catering company, the hotel, and according to Section 12 of the contract they signed, I reserve the right to cancel any event that violates our company's core values, respect and integrity. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. But the deposits, the guests, everything is arranged, she stammered.
Yes.
Unfortunate timing, I said coolly. But unless I receive a formal apology and a reinstated invitation by 5 p.m. today, the Sapphire Grand will no longer host their event. All deposits will be forfeited, as per the cancellation policy they signed. This is highly irregular, she protested weakly. In my entire career, I've never. Neither have I interrupted. But I've also never been uninvited from my own brother's wedding while expected to pay for it. Please deliver my message promptly. Before she could reply, I ended the call. My phone slipped to my side as I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering so loud it drowned out every other sound. Part of me couldn't believe what I had just done. Another part knew it was long overdue. For too long, I'd smiled through clenched teeth while Melissa and her family chipped away at my dignity. For too long, I'd swallowed the sting of watching James, my brother, my anchor, become a stranger before my eyes. But the time for passivity was over. If James wanted Melissa's elitist world more than he wanted the bond we'd built across decades of storms, that was his choice. But he would not choose it on my dime. Not with my venue. Not with my money. Not while erasing me from his life. And standing up for myself. Finally, Howard Blake stepped forward, towering, chest puffed like he thought size was enough to scare me. This is outrageous. We have a binding agreement. You cannot cancel a wedding 10 days before the event. I met his glare without blinking. Actually, I can. Section 12 of your contract. The Sapphire Grand reserves the right to cancel any event that violates our ethical standards or poses a reputational risk to this establishment. Ethical standards? Eleanor spat, her voice dripping contempt. What nonsense. Attempting to exclude the venue owner from her own brother's wedding, I said sharply, while pocketing her financial contribution, qualifies as fraud. That violates ethics and potentially the law. Melissa jumped in, tears streaking her face. We didn't exclude you. We simply revised the guest list. By removing me, I countered, after taking my $65,000. My mother, confused, stepped forward. Natalie, I don't understand. Why would you not be invited to your own brother's wedding? I turned to James. The silence stretched. James looked trapped. His eyes darted from Melissa to me, then back again. It's complicated. No, I shook my head, feeling a strange calm flood me. It's simple. Either I am welcome at my brother's wedding as family, with respect, or there is no wedding at the Sapphire Grand. Melissa burst into fresh sobs. You can't do this.
Everything is arranged.
The guests are flying in from Europe.
The gown.
The flowers. The band. The deposits. I understand, I said softly. But understand this too. You will not erase me from my own family while standing in my house, eating my food, and spending my money. It was inconvenient, yes. But so is discovering that your only brother, the boy who once swore he'd never leave your side, has decided you're not good enough to stand at his wedding. Not worthy of a seat. Not worthy of a place in his life. Eleanor turned sharply to James. Her voice sliced through the room like a knife. This is absurd. Call her bluff. We'll find another venue. I let a thin smile cross my lips. With 10 days left? In the middle of peak wedding season? I shook my head slowly. You're welcome to try, but you'll forfeit your deposit here. And most other venues will demand full payment up front. At this point, it's not just unlikely, it's impossible. Melissa's face went white. Her manicured nails dug into her father's sleeve. Daddy, do something. Howard Blake's bluster faltered. He wasn't a fool. He knew when the tide was against him. His jaw worked as he studied me. Finally, he asked, What exactly do you want, Miss Warren? My answer was simple. Respect. The word hung in the air, sharp and immovable. I want a sincere apology, acknowledgement that what you tried to do was wrong, and a guarantee that I will be treated as family, not as the help at this wedding. Eleanor hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. This is extortion. No, I said firmly. This is a boundary. I stepped closer, my voice steady, cutting through the room's tension. For months, I've bent over backwards. Every demand, every slight, every insult, I absorbed it all. I financed a wedding that treated me like I didn't exist. That ends now. To my surprise, my mother moved beside me. Her hand brushed my arm, her voice soft, but strong. I agree with Natalie. What you planned is shameful, James. I raised you better. James finally looked up. His face was conflicted, shame battling with defiance. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Oh, I understand, I shot back. You've been so desperate to impress Melissa and her family, you forgot who's always been there for you, who worked double shifts to put you through trade school, who celebrated every success and never left your side during the failures. Something flickered in his eyes. For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of my brother, the real James, through the haze of pretension and pressure. I never wanted to hurt you, Nat, he said quietly. And yet, I replied, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay composed, you are willing to ban me from your wedding while keeping my money. How did you think that would make me feel? He hesitated, fumbling. I thought you'd understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the bigger picture. And I was the sacrifice? The words cut me as I spoke them. James had no answer. Howard cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Let's be practical. Miss Warren, if we agree to your terms, will you allow the wedding to proceed? I turned to James. This wasn't about contracts anymore. That depends. Is that what you want, James? Am I just an obligation to be tolerated, or do you actually want your only sister at your wedding? The room froze. Every eye turned to him. The silence felt endless. James looked at Melissa, then at me, then down at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I want you there, Nat. I always did. I just got caught up. The planning, the expectations. Trying to make it perfect. Perfect for who? I asked softly. Again, silence. Melissa's patience snapped. She stomped her heel against the carpet. This is my wedding. I should decide who attends. No, James said suddenly, his voice firm for the first time in weeks. It's our wedding. And Natalie is my sister. She belongs there. She deserves to be there. Melissa's eyes flashed venom. After everything she's done? She threatened to ruin us. After you tried to erase her while keeping her money, James countered, standing taller now, his shoulders squaring. Think about that, Melissa. How would you feel if someone did that to you? For the first time since I met her, Melissa was silent. I turned back to the group. My voice was clear, resolute. Here's what's going to happen. I'll allow this wedding to move forward under 3 conditions. First, a written apology from the bride and groom for attempting to exclude me. Second, I will be treated with the respect owed to both a sister and a businesswoman throughout every event. Third, my $65,000 contribution will be acknowledged in the program, not as a venue discount, but as a gift. From a loving sister. Howard's expression softened. He gave a small nod. Those terms are reasonable, given the circumstances. Melissa gasped. Father. Enough, Melissa, he snapped, his voice hard. Miss Warren is right. What you and your mother tried was not only inappropriate, it was dangerous. We're lucky she's even willing to consider compromise. Eleanor's face twisted, bitter and sour, but she said nothing. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, still trying to make sense of the storm unraveling before them. I looked at James. Do we have an agreement? He hesitated, then finally nodded.
Yes.
And Nat,
I'm sorry.
I should never have let it go this far. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. A crack of light through the darkness. For the first time in months, I felt the faint possibility that my brother wasn't completely lost. Then the wedding will proceed as scheduled, I said, pulling open the conference room door. Victoria will coordinate with my staff on the final details. One by one, they filed out. Melissa's glare burned into me like fire. Eleanor's silence was poison on her tongue. Howard's steps were heavy but resigned. James lingered. When the others had left and the room finally fell quiet, James turned to me. His eyes glistened. His voice was low, trembling. I really am sorry, Nat. I don't even know who I've become these past few months. I held his gaze, my throat tightening. Neither do I. But I hope you figure out before you say I do. Marriage is hard enough when you're being true to yourself. It's impossible when you're living someone else's dream. He nodded slowly. For the first time in months, I felt him actually hear me. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. That's what family does, I said. The real kind. Not the kind that only values status and appearances. He pressed his lips together, then turned to rejoin his waiting fiancée. I watched him go, wondering if the wedding would even happen, and if it did, what kind of life would follow. Only time would tell. The days leading up to the wedding blurred into a storm of tension and preparation. I threw myself into the work, determined to honor my promise. Every table setting, every centerpiece, every dish leaving the kitchen, it all had to be flawless. If I was going to be part of this, I would make it unforgettable. Word of the confrontation had spread quietly through my staff. Instead of gossip, it sparked loyalty. They worked with renewed energy, their pride in me showing in the smallest details. They weren't just preparing a wedding, they were standing with me. Victoria Hayes, the planner who had once been the messenger of my humiliation, surprised me. The shock had worn off, and in its place was something different. Respect. She carried herself differently around me now, her clipped tone softened, her eyes more searching. "I need to apologize," she told me one afternoon as we reviewed the final seating chart. Her voice was steady, but her shoulders were tense. "Had I known who you truly were, I never would have made that call." I gave her a small smile. "You were doing your job with the information you had. But in the future, maybe question clients who ask you to cut out immediate family while pocketing their money." She winced. Lesson learned. Believe me. As promised, I received the written apology. James's letter was raw, remorseful. His words bled regret. Melissa's note, on the other hand, read like it had been drafted by a legal team, cold, stilted, technical. It checked the boxes. Nothing more. But I took it. A win on paper was still a win. 2 nights before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner became my true test. The moment I entered the restaurant's private dining room, conversations faltered. Heads turned. Eyes followed me. I felt their judgment in the pause of forks and the tightening of shoulders. I lifted my chin and walked forward. My dress was elegant but strong, a statement in fabric. I belonged here. James crossed the room immediately, kissing my cheek, leading me to a seat of honor near the head table. His warmth was a shield, though Melissa's tight smile burned across the room. Eleanor avoided me altogether, pretending I wasn't there. Howard, surprisingly, approached. His hand extended, his tone almost gentle. "Miss Warren, I want to personally apologize for what happened. In business, I've always respected integrity. You showed it directly, firmly. I can respect that." I shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. I appreciate it." "Howard," he corrected. "We're about to be family, after all." I studied him for a moment. Perhaps not every Blake was blind. Throughout the evening, I watched James closely. Or rather, I watched him watching Melissa. She was radiant, charming, magnetic, working the room like a seasoned actress. Compliments flowed toward her, and she received them with the practiced ease of royalty. But when the spotlight shifted, her mask slipped. I caught the sharp whispers she hissed at the waitstaff. The scowls when a guest's conversation didn't revolve around her. The fleeting looks of irritation when attention dared to stray elsewhere. James noticed, too. His expression tightened in moments he thought no one was looking. After dinner, I slipped onto the terrace for a breath of night air. The city stretched before me, glittering alive. The cool air steadied me. Then I heard footsteps. "You look beautiful tonight, Nat," James said softly, joining me at the railing. "Thank you," I replied, my voice calm. "It's a lovely evening." We stood side by side, gazing at the skyline. For a moment, we weren't bride, groom, sister, or conflict. Just siblings again. "Do you remember the fire escape at Mom's old apartment?" James asked. "We'd sit there for hours, planning our futures." I smiled at the memory. "You were going to build skyscrapers. I wanted a little bed and breakfast with a garden." "Life turned out differently," he said, his voice tinged with longing. "Better in some ways," I admitted. "Though I still might get that garden one day." We shared a silence that felt like home. For the first time in months, it wasn't strained. Just quiet.
Familiar.
Finally, James spoke again, his voice raw. "I keep thinking about what you said. About being true to myself. I don't know if I am." I stayed still, giving him room. Everything with Melissa happened so fast. She was beautiful, sophisticated, connected. Dating her felt like stepping into a world I never knew existed. He swallowed hard. And now, I prompted gently. "Now I'm standing out here with my sister, hiding from my own rehearsal dinner, wondering if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life." My chest ached. I wanted to protect him, to fix it, but some choices weren't mine to make. "Cold feet are normal before a wedding," I said carefully. "This feels like more than cold feet," he confessed. "The way she and her mother treated you, it opened my eyes." The way she talks to servers when she thinks no one's watching. The way she mocks my friends from the company. The constant pressure to be someone I'm not. They're real concerns, I admitted. He dragged a hand through his hair, frustrated. But the wedding's in 2 days. Everything's paid for.
Guests are flying in.
Canceling now would be a disaster. More of a disaster than a divorce in a year?
Or 5.
Or 10, with children in the middle. My words were soft, but sharp. He stared at me, torn. Before he could answer, Melissa's voice pierced the night. There you are. Everyone's asking where you've disappeared to. The spell broke. James straightened, forcing a smile. Just getting some air with Natalie. We'll be right in. Melissa's eyes flicked between us, suspicion flickering. Don't be too long. She vanished back inside. James exhaled, his mask sliding back into place. I stayed at the railing, staring at the city lights, wondering if my brother would find the courage to face the truth, or if he'd walk blind into a future he couldn't escape. Melissa's voice echoed from the doorway. The Harringtons are about to leave, and they came all the way from London. Her tone was sharp, polished for the crowd behind her, but edged with irritation meant for James. Then she disappeared inside, her perfume lingering like a warning. James gave me an apologetic look, shoulders heavy. I should go. Of course, I said softly, placing a hand on his arm. But, James, whatever you decide, I'll support you. That's what real family does. His eyes flickered with gratitude. He nodded, then vanished back into the glare of chandeliers and polite conversation. I stayed behind, the night air still wrapped around me, carrying the weight of what was coming. The morning of the wedding dawned bright. June light poured through the windows of the Sapphire Grand, and the hotel seemed to glow. The ballroom had been transformed into Melissa's dreamscape, orchids and roses everywhere, their fragrance heavy in the air. Hundreds of candles sparkled against crystal, casting golden reflections across the marble. It was perfect, at least on the surface. This time, I wasn't tucked away behind the scenes. I sat in the front row, not just the venue owner, but a sister reclaiming her place. Eleanor Blake's disapproval cut through the room like a blade, her eyes narrowing, lips pinched. But Howard, to my surprise, inclined his head with something like respect when our eyes met. Then the music began. Guests straightened in their seats. James stood at the altar, a figure of composure in his tuxedo, but his jaw was tight, his hands restless. And then came Melissa. She appeared at the end of the aisle, her father guiding her forward. Gasps rippled through the hall. She was breathtaking. Her custom gown glittered, her veil cascading like liquid light. A flawless bride on a flawless stage. The ceremony unfolded smoothly until the minister's voice cut the air. If anyone here can show just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. A hush fell. You could hear the rustle of silk, the breath of 200 guests. James turned his head. His eyes found mine. And in that instant I saw it, clarity. A decision. The brother I thought I'd lost suddenly standing in front of me again. I have something to say. The room erupted in murmurs. Melissa froze, her bouquet trembling in her hands. James, the minister asked, uncertain. I can't do this, James said, his voice steady, carrying to every corner of the room. Not like this. Not when I'm not being true to myself. Not when I'm betraying the values my sister and I were raised with.
Gasps.
Whispers. Disbelief. Melissa's face twisted, rage and humiliation etched across her perfect features. What are you doing? She hissed, her voice breaking through the silence. James turned to her fully. I'm sorry, Melissa. You're beautiful. You're accomplished. You'll make someone very happy one day. But that someone isn't me. I've been trying to change who I am to fit into your world. And in the process, I almost lost the person who's always been there for me. His eyes shifted back to me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my brother. Not the polished version Melissa had tried to mold, but James, the man I knew, the man I loved. This wedding is canceled, he said firmly. I apologize for the inconvenience. And I thank you all for coming. Chaos exploded. Melissa collapsed into Eleanor's arms, wailing, the picture of operatic devastation. Eleanor shouted about lawsuits, about reputations destroyed. Howard, however, stayed calm, almost detached. He busied himself with soothing his wife and daughter, as if the outcome had been inevitable all along. James didn't flinch. He crossed the room, walked straight to me, and took my hand. Together, we walked out of the ballroom, leaving the uproar behind. In the quiet of my office, the adrenaline drained from him. He laughed and cried at once, his shoulders shaking. I can't believe I just did that. Did you see their faces? I did, I said, handing him a glass of water. That was quite an exit. I'm going to pay for it, he admitted. Financially, socially, probably in ways I haven't even thought of yet. But when the minister asked that question, I knew. I couldn't do it. Not when all I could think about was how she and her mother treated you, willing to take your money, but cut you out of your own brother's wedding. If I'd gone through with it, I'd be endorsing that behavior. I'd be becoming one of them. I studied him, seeing the weight lift even as the consequences pressed in. What will you do now? James leaned back in the booth, stirring cream into his coffee. A small smile tugged at his mouth, hesitant but real. Remember Sarah? From the city planning office? The one who always helped me with permits. I nodded. She called after hearing about the wedding, just to check in. We ended up talking for hours. The warmth in his voice made me smile. Sarah's wonderful, I said. She's smart.
Kind.
And she really sees you for who you are. That makes all the difference, James murmured. He glanced at me, his eyes softer than I'd seen in months. She wants to meet you properly. I told her all about my amazing sister who saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. My chest tightened with something tender. I'd love that. Sunlight spilled through the window, golden and forgiving. For the first time in a long while, I felt the warmth of hope, not the fragile kind, but the steady glow that comes after surviving a storm. The wounds Melissa and her family had left were still healing, but James and I were stitching ourselves back together. Stronger, wiser, hardened in the right places, softer in the ones that mattered. Sometimes it takes almost losing someone to realize just how much they mean. 6 months later, I sat in my office at the Sapphire Grand. Financial reports fanned across my desk, numbers painted in black ink that told a story of triumph. Bookings were at an all-time high. Elite Catering had a waiting list stretching well into the next year. The empire I'd built from nothing was thriving. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Anthony, my hotel manager, stood there with a strange look on his face. Melissa Blake is in the lobby, he said carefully. She's asking to see you. I set down my pen, surprised. Melissa? Did she say why? He shook his head.
No.
But she seems different. Less imperial, if you know what I mean. Curiosity stirred. Send her up. When Melissa stepped into my office, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the polished society princess with flawless hair and a wardrobe curated for magazine covers. This Melissa wore jeans, a plain sweater, and almost no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a casual ponytail. She looked smaller somehow.
Human.
Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice stripped of its usual edge. I know this must be unexpected. Please, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Have a seat. What can I do for you? She sat, folding her hands in her lap like a schoolgirl summoned to the principal's office. I came to apologize. Properly this time. Not with some lawyer-drafted statement. I raised an eyebrow but kept quiet. What I did to you was inexcusable, she continued, her voice trembling. Trying to exclude you from James's wedding while keeping your money. It wasn't just rude. It was cruel. And maybe even criminal. I was so obsessed with creating the perfect society wedding that I lost sight of basic decency. Her words caught me off guard. And what brought on this revelation? I asked. She exhaled heavily. After James left me at the altar, I was humiliated. Furious. I blamed everyone but myself. I rushed into dating Curtis, a hedge fund manager my mother practically handpicked. 6 weeks later, he proposed. She was thrilled. His family has more money than we do. Her voice cracked. But then I overheard him talking to his friends. He said I was high maintenance, but good arm candy for client dinners. He said he could train me to be the perfect corporate wife. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. That must have hurt. It did, she whispered. It was a wake-up call. For the first time, I saw myself the way someone else did. And I didn't like it. I broke off the engagement and started therapy. My mother was livid, but my father, he surprised me. He supported me. Howard always struck me as more self-aware than Eleanor, I said. Melissa nodded. He pulled me aside after I told them about therapy. He said, Melissa, I indulged your mother's obsession with climbing because I thought it made her happy. But it's turned her into someone I barely recognize. And now it's doing the same to you. Her eyes welled with tears. I'll never forget that. I studied her closely. For the first time, she wasn't hiding behind charm or venom. There was no manipulation in her gaze, just exhaustion and honesty. It's been months of hard work, she admitted. I've had to confront some ugly truths about myself, especially how I treated you and James. My therapist helped me see that all of it, my cruelty, my arrogance, came from insecurity. Despite all the privilege I had, I never felt good enough on my own. She met my eyes directly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see the damage I caused, and I'm trying to be better. I let the silence stretch before answering. I appreciate that. Genuine apologies are rare. There's one more thing. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $65,000. Your deposit, she said. It should have been returned to you the moment the wedding was canceled. Keeping it was wrong. This belongs to you. I stared at the check, stunned. Thank you. This is unexpected. It's the right thing to do, she said simply. She stood, smoothing her sweater. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for seeing me. As she turned toward the door, I found myself asking, have you spoken to James? She paused, her hand on the handle.
No.
I thought about it, but it would be selfish. He's happy with Sarah, from what I hear. He deserves that happiness, without me complicating things. And then she was gone. I sat in silence for a long time, the check heavy in my hand. People could change, it seemed, if they were brave enough to face their reflection and own the damage they'd caused. That evening, I met James and Sarah for dinner at one of my new hotel properties. They glowed with a quiet happiness, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. Sarah was warm, intelligent, and treated the waitstaff with genuine kindness. I noticed immediately, because kindness, I'd learned, reveals more about a person than beauty or wealth ever could. You'll never guess who came to see me today, I told James, my fork pausing over a slice of chocolate cake. He looked up, curious. Who? Melissa. His eyes widened. Melissa Blake? As in Melissa Blake admitted, she was wrong, Melissa Blake. I nodded slowly, savoring the moment.
She apologized.
Not the lawyer-crafted kind. A real one. And she returned the money. Voluntarily. James stared, almost disbelieving. Are you sure it wasn't an imposter? I laughed, shaking my head. It was her. But not the woman you almost married. This Melissa was different. He leaned back, still processing. People can surprise you, I guess. Though I'm grateful every single day that I didn't go through with that wedding. Beside him, Sarah squeezed his hand, smiling softly. So am I, she said, selfishly. I let my gaze drift to the candles flickering on the table. The whole ordeal had taught me something I hadn't understood before. For years, I admitted, I measured success by how many hotels I opened, how flawless my numbers looked on paper. I built Sapphire by sacrificing relationships, by proving I didn't need anyone's help. I thought that was strength. You've always been the strong one, James said gently. Strength isn't doing it all alone, I replied. It's knowing when to fight for yourself, when to set boundaries, when to walk away from anyone who tries to shrink you. If I hadn't stood up to you and Melissa about excluding me, I might still be letting people drain my generosity while treating me like I was less than them. James dropped his gaze, shame flickering across his face. I'm sorry I put you in that position. We both learned from it, I said softly, and we're stronger for having lived through it. The months that followed reshaped me. I made deliberate changes, not just in business, but in life. I joined a mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs. I didn't just teach them about balance sheets or branding, I taught them about boundaries, about self-worth, about refusing to apologize for expecting respect. Too many women, I realized, were fighting the same silent battle I had fought, being generous, yet overlooked. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my work-obsessed years. For the first time in a long while, I laughed without checking my phone. Relationships that had nothing to do with contracts or networking reminded me of who I was outside the Sapphire Empire. James and I set one firm rule for our Sunday brunches: no work talk. Just us. Just siblings. Pancakes, coffee, and dreams. It became sacred. Perhaps the biggest surprise was Howard Blake. After Melissa's apology, he invited me to lunch. Over a glass of wine, he leaned in and said, I built my dealership empire by recognizing talent and integrity. You showed both. Eleanor and Melissa may have money and connections. But you, he tapped the table for emphasis. You have character. That's more valuable. His words stayed with me. The $65,000 Melissa returned didn't go back into Sapphire's accounts. I started something new with it. A fund. True love, true values. Grants for couples who wanted meaningful weddings but couldn't afford them. The Sapphire Grand became a place where vows weren't about appearances, but about authenticity. A year after the disaster that wasn't a wedding, James proposed to Sarah. Their ceremony was nothing like the lavish one Melissa had dreamed of. It was small, intimate, held in the garden of my newest hotel, surrounded only by those who truly mattered. When James asked me to stand beside him, not as best man, but as his best woman, I said yes with tears in my eyes. On the morning of his wedding, I helped him straighten his tie. His reflection in the mirror looked calm, grounded, sure. He turned to me, gratitude in his eyes. You saved me from the biggest mistake of my life, he said. And from connection came a life richer than I had ever imagined. By honoring my worth, I preserved my dignity. I challenged others, Melissa included, to face themselves honestly. Life is full of tests. That wedding that never happened became mine. And it revealed strength I didn't know I had. Because here's the truth. You can't control how others treat you. But you can always decide what treatment you'll accept. And sometimes, the first no is the doorway to the yes you've been waiting for. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to stand up for yourself when someone tried to take advantage of your generosity? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, hit like. Subscribe for more life lessons. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. Your worth is not defined by the people who fail to see it. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your value is unshakable, even when others don't recognize it.